Well, I wanted to do a markup and get some high probability time frames and price levels for Litecoin as it is approaching the halving, and the post halving period for Bitcoin typically tends to be pretty bullish. First thing I like to do is get some very simple time cycles. So I start by taking these trends excuse me, and just draw a nice simple trend line coming down, downtrend, break a trend, retest, sideways, and then an uptrend. And if you grab a time cycle tool or the fib time zone tool and measure from the top of the trend to the break of the trend, you can see it pretty much gives us a perfect rendition of this downtrend, uptrend, pretty much right at the exact high. Now, if you're unsure of exactly where to put these time cycle tools, I mean, the thing to do is to start at the top of the trend and go right to where the trend breaks on a high term time frame. And this should be pretty accurate within a tick or two, but as you can see here, one tick is a big amount of price. So I mean, these time zones, I mean, you kind of want to match them up with the price action. And you can see that, you know, here's a clear bottom this week, clear market high this week, clear market bottom, and hopefully this is not a clear high. This angle is not very promising, but the market seems to be bullish. If it was bearish, I mean, you can see we have a clear A, B, C pattern, and we'll look at that a little later, as it is a common trading pattern to take these ABCs, and here's your A, B, C, and whatever this level is here, when price breaks it, it is a common, just old-fashioned trading strategy that's where you enter along. But this here could also be a giant bear flag coming up to resistance, and if we were to take a downside target, let's go into our fib time tool here and add a 6. And if this was to end up being just another ABC, we could be looking at something like this. A, B, and C, which comes out pretty close to about 50% of our next time cycle. But we do know that on what looks like to be the week of August 7th, that we should expect some kind of a change in trend. Currently we have an uptrend. Hopefully the change in trend is a continuation of this trend, but in a much steeper fashion, like what we have over here. We have an uptrend that changed, changed trend. It went from a mild uptrend to an insanely feverish uptrend, which we could be seeing something like that. And for the rate of increase, if we just grab some of these other ones, see that this angle is pretty close to the same, which means that price was rising at pretty much the same rate. And here you can see that if we were to take that same time cycle, we would have time, and a half a time, which is a very common market cycle. So as far as high probability time frames, I mean, we would be looking for a serious uptrend to begin here, or a retracement of some kind, because we can see here's our downtrend, our sideways market, and then what hopefully should be our uptrend. But really it's just a change of trend, and markets just tend to cycle in that fashion of a downtrend, sideways trend, and an uptrend. So if this here is a continuation into a steeper uptrend, what kind of price levels would we be looking at? We would want to first just take our Fibonacci retracement tool and go from the swing low to the swing high and see what kind of retracement values we get. And you can see we haven't really stopped exactly at any. We've come pretty close to the 44% mark. And if this was to be the high, which it certainly could be, it wouldn't be the strongest retracement of the macro, but if we take the next high down, we tap the 50% mark pretty much right to the dollar, and we have this nice A, B, C retracement right there. So if this was just to be a high, we were to get some type of a downtrend here for the next cycle, we would be looking at first at just a retracement of our current uptrend. So if we take our Fibonacci retracement tool from the bottom to the top, now we're measuring to the downside, so we want these numbers getting higher as price goes down, because it's a retracement of that trend. Just looking for any past weekly resistance levels that would correspond with a retracement at this price level. I don't see anything overbearingly significant. And if we look at the angle of this trend right here, here's our downtrend, and we have this trend right here. I mean, it seems very, very close to this one. That means very much, but if we were to take this range right here and assume that our next trend is going to be a more feverish pump to the upside, which there's really no way to know, but we should expect a change of trend here this week. So for levels, if we take this trend right here and just say that we're starting a whole brand new cycle, we would be looking at expansions of this range. First, we will be looking at the 1.5 to 1.618 range, and then from there it'd be just doublings to a double of the range. We could add a 3 for a triple of the range, or 2.5, 3.5, and each in between. So we would have a high probability target area if this was to expand somewhere in here between 175 and 200. And if Litecoin was to grow seriously expansively, well, then we would take this entire range. Well, we can see here our 0.618 if we actually got a full retrace of our range, our first, 175, 76 seems to be the golden ratio retracement of the entire range, measuring from the bull market high to the low. And just expanding our current range right at the change of trend, we see that that comes out right at 1.5 expansion of this lower range. So for a high probability target area, this $175 psychological level for a break to the upside would probably be a very high probability area for at least some kind of a pullback. And here being we have this A, B, C, as we break this level, confirming a bullish market. We've already done it once. We broke above the 200 EMA, but we've kind of dipped below it. If we can turn price around and reclaim this, break through here, price come up and come down and retest this past support and resistance level on the top side of the ABC with something like this, which would keep our current trend intact. Now what we're looking for is for price to come up to one of these values and actually break trend. If it continues to the upside, and if we consider this to be the bottom of the trend, we would be looking for a break of this. And if we wanted to be bearish, we could certainly draw this trend line over here and say that we've had an uptrend that broke into a sideways market, had a fake out pump, retested the break of that trend and fell back below the 200 EMA, and then is now getting ready for a very significant downtrend. And if Bitcoin starts on a significant downtrend, which it certainly can if it fails to break through the $32,000 sell wall, it will probably drag most of these other assets down with it, hopefully just to a double bottom and not lower lows. And if it did, we would be looking for some type of a measured move, which we already looked at, or else we could we could take this range and we could flip it to the downside for a downside target in the 1.618 range, which kind of gets us down in the area of our lows over here. So for high probability areas, we'll just go 1.5. We have a high probability target on the upside and a high probability target on the bottom side, which is a relatively low target, but if price breaks, certainly a possible and a real one if we were to take a measured move off of this ABC. Not much correlation there. If we were to take a look at our stochastic RSI and just see what that is showing, just to kind of get an idea. I don't like how it didn't come all the way to the bottom. I mean, it came down, but not all the way to the bottom. Excuse me. But it could certainly pull some kind of a reverse head and shoulders even on this and continue up to the top. It did come down. I mean, as we see here, I mean, same thing. Came down, touched the bottom, and then ran to the top. So not much there. If we take a look at the wave trend oscillators, I mean, I'm just using the free version of Market Liberator. Well, it's not exactly free, I guess it's donation based. We see what could possibly be some curvature to the upside. The money flow is obviously certainly coming up and either about to reject its zero line or cross over into the green. These top waves kind of seem like they could be curving to the downside ever so slightly, but there's also this curving to the upside, showing some nice market balance. So for a midterm target, we would be looking at a retrace of our current trends, which gives us the 0.618 here at about 175, maybe front run by a few dollars or so. And our macro kind of higher target to the upside, we would be looking at the expansion of the entire range. Bringing us up to the 1.5 area there. And then we did the same thing on the or we will do the same thing on the bottom side. We will grab the entire range and expand it to the downside. There we go. Now this would be an expansion of this entire from the swing high to swing low. So this here would be a pretty significant drop or much lower target. Well, here's the 1.5 right there, which would be an obvious loss of this top range, and then one would expect it to come up and retest the range. So now we have two high probability targets for the midterm, to the short side, into the downside. And just looking at some of these trends, we have some high probability time frames for our next change of trend. We have at August 7th, and if we took this here from this downtrend, we would have a time, and a half a time, so we'd be looking for our next change to be at 50% of this time cycle, or all the way at the end of it, with maybe some miniature little pullbacks or pivots at the 25%, 50%, 75%, and then 100%. Could culminate at 50%, could culminate at the end, or could just have some pullbacks in between. Or if we go to the downside, some mini rallies. And for some more correlation, I see a couple trends. We'll take this trend. We can see, I'm going to say right there. And you can see that we have these highs coming down. We broke that trend, price broke through, appears to be hopefully retesting for a bounce where it is currently. So make sure that trend line is genuine. And we also have this trend right here, which is why you get cycle ends at a 50% level with a double top retest like what we see on Bitcoin. Because if we were to take this right here and or this trend right here and make a time cycle out of it, it's also making some kind of a fork. But if we were to take a time cycle off of this, it'll probably come out right at the 50% of the time cycle that we have already, which is why here we gotta change the color. Yikes. There we go. Now there's no exact perfect right answer for this, just right where the trend breaks, and then which should be about right there, which comes out pretty close to 50% of our next time cycle. I mean, if I moved it over one tick, if this is our next time cycle, we could see a high at the 50% mark because of the time cycle created by this double trend. Very similar to what is on the Bitcoin chart for the last bull run. So that's just something to keep in mind as a secondary point for a potential reversal would be 50% of the time cycle. So now we have a high potential for a change August 7th, or the week of March 4th, 2024, and the week of September 23rd, 2024. We would expect this to be a downtrend, a sideways trend, and an uptrend, or else we have a downtrend, sideways trend, and an uptrend. There's not really any way of knowing. All we can really do is monitor this trend. But one thing I noticed right off the bat looking at these two trends, if we were to draw a simple fork and just kind of match the inverse of that angle, it's probably going to provide a sufficient see something there. Yeah, see, these angles should be about the same. So if we just mark this as our high, and then if we take a dash, no, we don't want to do that. If we take a another line, we start to divide this by 50%, it'd be somewhere right in here. Same thing on the bottom side. Whichever direction price breaks, it would be reasonable to expect these to provide some kind of a reaction, just because there are qualities of past price action, price time, and price percentage change in one move. draw just a simple trend line there to kind of get quite a bit of correlation here with our 50% time value, our trend coming up, and the 50% of this wedge comes out right with the top of this ABC. This doesn't mean that price will just automatically come here like a magnet. It's just a high probability area that has a lot of correlation. So there's our ABC pattern. This is our regular lightning bolt pattern. So for a short-term level, the top of this ABC has a lot of correlation. We could see price come up here and then get some kind of a retracement and then a run. But these are just some things to watch for. If we get a break of this trend, especially if we break back below this trend. I mean, if we break below both of these, and here we have these trends are also crossing literally right at our time values. We would expect some type of a reaction here. The problem is we are in an uptrend. So if the trend was to change, we would have to consider this right here, which also again comes out, the high of this trend comes out right at 50% of the time cycle. It's a very common thing. And say that this is an uptrend and a sideways trend, looking for another uptrend. And if we just took a simple measured move, and we see that we also come out right at our speed line there. Very close to our number. So I mean, I would expect price to actually wick up in here somewhere but close in this area. And really what we're looking for any price action down in this territory would be a break of this trend. We would be looking for price to come up to a known fib value or one of these high probability areas and break trend. Then we would take the high of this trend and the low of it when it's actually finished, confirmed by a break of the trend, and then we could take some retracement values to the downside, which would and should match our fib expansion levels of the range. So on Litecoin, I don't see anything in particular that is giving any insanely bullish or bearish signals. It looks very, very neutral, very, very balanced. But we do have some data that we can use to make decisions as time and price move along. We know that we have a trend change coming up very soon, and if we break this red uptrend, I would certainly expect this trend to trend downward and hopefully be finished by this 50% mark. And if we get a macro dump on Bitcoin, I mean, I would be expecting these lower targets. And if we get some explosive price action, well, then we're looking at some of these other targets. And for a short-term target, we have this right here. If this was to be the high put in already. We can take a retracement of this trend. We'll just assume for now that it is the high. Look at our golden retracement zone. Which would put us right in here somewhere. Between the 0.5 and the 0.618. Somewhere between $65 and $72. So for a short-term target, we would also have a A, B, C per se, but not quite so much. I would be on a downtrend. I would be targeting a much more conservative value, which it's already tapped twice for a double bottom, and then put in a very nice higher high, and appears to be pulling a measured move from here to here to here. And if we were to take a measured move right here, we're also looking at coming up to our level. I think this here is going to be a significant level at $125, $127. And the next one will be $175. And we get up to all the way up to $265, which I bet if we expand this range, we'll see a correlation. Or we need reverse. There we go. Yeah, it comes out right at a doubling of this range. So these are all high probability targets that I see in the Litecoin chart. I see a some type of change in trend time coming up, because we're approaching it here on the weekly, so we're looking at some type of major change the first to second week of August. And what we're looking for is for either a blast off in a much more feverish uptrend with a short-term target of somewhere around 125. Then we could see a excuse me. And then we could see another pullback to this trend line, and maybe continue up to our golden zone up here where our next high probability area was. And the price just keeps going and running, and we end up in a some kind of an insane bull run. We were looking at an expansion of the entire bear market, this entire price range, leading us up to 1200 approximately, which is let's get some percentages. If we were to bounce here and just continue this trend, make it to our short-term target, we're talking 40%. Our next target, we're talking 90%. The high, or doubling of our lower range, would be 193%. And then here we have about 1,175% or so. So if the market ends up being macro bullish, those would be the targets. And the only other thing that I could think to really look at would be a volume profile tool, but we pretty much just see it here on the chart. If we were just considering this one very large trading range, because it is, we would probably get a value area high. That would actually probably be much lower. Our point of control would be support, resistance, flip, dead smack in the middle. So if this is our value area high, value area low, point of control, we can just take a look once quick. Pretty close. Not quite. Yeah, so this is the value area that the volume profile is producing. We had the high, right? And then our point of control. So price came down and retested this point of control, and then it's now pretty much continued to the top of the value area and could be very well looking to come down to the bottom, which would be an extremely bearish pattern, because then you would have left shoulder, neckline, head, neckline, right shoulder, I mean, that's not certainly very bullish looking there. If we were to get a quick pump up here with a rejection, and that value area high comes out at right at 138. This is another thing to consider, along with the insanely large fair value gap down here that probably doesn't really mean much because the asset has grown so much. But if Bitcoin does a macro rejection with a macro collapse and continues down to 8K or so, as it very well could, we would expect some of these very large and insane drops on these other assets that just don't have the same liquidity that Bitcoin does. So if we were to consider this to be a giant head and shoulders forming and measure the neckline, we come out pretty much right at the bottom of the range, or the bottom of the chart, which seems unlikely but certainly possible. But that's my thoughts on Litecoin. Rather than just post a chart or give some long tutorial on how to do specific things, I just figured I would just show how I mark these up specifically, just as I do it. I hope it was a blessing and help to somebody. We'll see you next time.